So I want to draw attention to the way, this is how it works, great.
Yep.
I want to draw attention to the way in which two technologies interact, artificial general intelligence and space technology. I'm Jonas Vollmer. I work for Polaris Ventures, and I'll say a few more words about that at the end. Now, for this brief presentation, I'm going to lean into kind of wacky ideas more strongly than I usually would, and I'm relying on you to think carefully about, which bits seem plausible to you and which ones don't seem plausible. But I think it'll make it more interesting to sort of like engage with some of the out there ideas. So first of all, I'm going to argue that AGI, artificial general intelligence, makes space governance more urgent and a problem that an issue that might come up much more strongly, much sooner than we commonly assume. Second, I'll sort of present some potential for value lock-in, which is sort of a particular concern that comes up in this context, but it's kind of speculative, and so I'm putting a question mark. And third, I'm going to present sort of an illustrative proposal for allocating the cosmic endowment, and that is sort of intended to surface some of the challenges that I'd like to see more work on. Okay, so AGI. Forecasters and metaculus, for example, predict that artificial general intelligence could be reached relatively soon, i.e., systems that can do most of what humans can do. And in particular, if we manage to automate AI research, that could result in superhuman intelligence within a couple years after. So like one path that I do not think is too implausible is AGI by 2028, superintelligence by 2030, and then that resulting in unprecedented scientific and technological progress, including space technology. And that could result in sort of large-scale space exploration being launched in not like centuries, but just like within a couple decades. So I think this sort of raises the question, how are we going to govern that potential expansion? And in particular, some people have explored the idea of tiny space probes being launched at nearly the speed of light from Earth to create settlements on all sort of reachable galaxies, distant galaxies at once. And obviously, that's a very big project. That brings me to the next point, the potential for value lock-in. So established settlements are easy to defend, but hard to change. Once a settlement is there, it is basically run by whoever is in that location. And so any sort of like governance mechanisms or law enforcement algorithms or whatever we want need to be implemented on the probes that win the race to wherever they're going. And it might be hard to change what's happening in those places afterwards. Now, here's an illustrative proposal for how to allocate the cosmic endowment. Cosmic endowment is sort of just like all the all the stars that are within reach of our civilization. And I'm going to sort of outline a very sketchy example, and I will say a few words what I think is desirable about each of these bullet points. So first of all, allocating the solar system to current humans, ideally equally, some sort of universal solar system income. So that means all the matter, all the energy to be distributed, and biological life to continue in the solar system. And I think this works well with what a lot of people in our society prefer to happen in such a in a world where AGI is developed. Now, maybe a small fraction of the cosmic endowment can be allocated to humans, companies, governments, AIs as sort of a compromise. So one could imagine that certain governments have preferences, what they would like to happen with some distant stars, or some eccentric billionaire would like to have a star dedicated to their particular project. And while I'm not particularly excited about such prospects, I think allocating a small fraction of the resources to such purposes basically makes it more, more like a project that lots of people can get behind. And like it disincentivizes perhaps like dangerous racing dynamics or the potential for conflict, you know, about winning sort of the race for space. And in a similar vein, maybe a small fraction should be allocated to plausible value systems. So we could imagine that, you know, some value systems have kind of bounded utility. So let's say we care about there being amazing art in the world. A lot of people would, you know, feel inclined that like to say that like having some amount of art is amazing, tiling the universe with art is less desirable. And so if we dedicate some resources towards such endeavors, you know, we sort of realize those values up until a point where diminishing returns kick in. And then the vast majority, ideally, would be allocated, in my mind at least, to some reflection procedure. So if we think about like how our civilization's values have changed over the couple past centuries, it would have been a real shame to lock in, you know, the values of the past into the long-term future. So, you know, abhorrently, yeah, terrible values of like, you know, racist, sexist perspectives, you know, worshiping ancient gods or whatever. We probably want to continue the moral progress that we've had to date and into the future. And so there are like various different ways we could like use AI to reflect on our values and further improve those. And I think all of these, you know, different like parts of the allocation should be subject to human rights and also basic rights for sentient AIs. I do not think, and that's kind of an important part. And again, that sort of needs to be implemented on whichever, you know, space probes we send out. So obviously this is like pretty out there, but I think it is also, you know, there's like a decent chance of this sort of stuff becoming a lot more relevant sometime soon, and hardly anyone is working on it. And so I personally feel very excited about this work, and the foundation I work for is also interested in potentially funding such work. I don't want to overstate the interest, but if you're interested in, you know, working on this full time or like, you know, improving my like very sketchy proposal and answering some of the like upstream questions that maybe would need to be answered to make this into some viable blueprint, please reach out. Thank you.
Okay, you have time for at least a question. Great,
Yeah.
we're stuck on time.
Do you have examples of reflection procedures that you mentioned?
Well, I have questions about them. So typically, you know, one concept that's been explored by some people is coherent extrapolated volition, CEV. I personally don't particularly think it'll work. I think like, you know, there's a very large number of reflection procedures that you could choose from, and it's very hard to decide which ones are the right ones. So like, you know, if you ask me personally, I would say, well, maybe we want each human to like, you know, reflect on what reflection procedure they want to use with the assistance of a superintelligent AI system, and then, you know, from there, like, go further. But I'm not sure if that's going to work.
Examples of reflection systems in place today. I mean, like, do we do this?
Yeah.
Do we do reflection systems?
I mean, I think like, you know, democracy in some sense is like a way to reflect and aggregate different perspectives, but I think we can probably do a lot better. And I think like, so a big question regarding reflection procedures is like, which things can we sort of outsource to AI and which things do we need to figure out ourselves? So yeah.
I mean, some people use moral parliament, or some people use the reflective equilibrium or something, at least. But why we'd have to do that publicly to some extent.
I mean, I feel like these are far from full-fledged or like far from like operational, but they're like interesting starting points to think about. Yeah. One more question, I guess?
Yeah, it's the last question.
Thanks. You said values have shifted. You don't want to imbue the AI with historical values, but do you think the values at the time of the Apollo mission were more conducive to getting people on the moon, or do you think the values that we have now are more conducive to getting people on the moon?
I mean, I feel like I think like people will just want to expand, like whether we like it or not. Like there will be some actors in the world who will want to, travel or like send probes to distant galaxies. And so I think like as long as there's like some people who hold these values in the world, it's gonna happen whether I like it or not. So yeah, I guess that's sort of yeah. I do think like I personally value like moral progress a lot, and I understand that some people also don't see it that way. They're like sort of like, no, what we have right now is like the right set of values, and I think that's a tricky one to balance. One could also think about like, what kind of human rights would we come up with if we had another century to further develop them, and maybe they would change, and maybe our proposals should account for that. So there are like a lot of open questions there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.